There's a moment when someone questions your decision, challenges your choice, or demands an explanation for your actions. And in that moment, every instinct in your body screams at you to justify yourself, to explain your reasoning, to defend your position, to make them understand why you did what you did. But Machiavelli would tell you this is the exact moment you lose all your power, because the second you justify your actions to someone, you're admitting they have the authority to judge them. You're placing yourself in the position of defendant and them in the position of judge. And once that dynamic is established, you've already lost. Think about the most powerful people you know. When they make decisions, do they spend time explaining themselves to everyone who questions them? When they take action, do they seek approval from those who disagree? When they're challenged, do they immediately launch into detailed justifications? The answer is no. They act with conviction, they stand by their choices, and they let their results speak for themselves. They understand something that most people never learn. Justification is submission. Machiavelli observed this pattern in every court, every army, every political structure he studied. The leaders who constantly explained themselves were seen as weak and indecisive. The leaders who acted without apology were seen as strong and authoritative. The difference wasn't in the quality of their decisions, it was in how they handled questioning. Today you're going to learn why justifying your actions destroys your authority and how to respond to challenges without weakening your position. This isn't about being stubborn or unreasonable. This is about understanding that when you stop justifying yourself to others, you force them to respect your autonomy. Because in the game of power, the person who feels compelled to explain is always beneath the person who feels entitled to question. Let's establish the brutal psychological reality. Every time you justify your actions to someone, you're unconsciously communicating that they have the right to approve or disapprove of your choices. You're asking for their permission retroactively. You're submitting your decisions to their judgment court. Machiavelli understood this dynamic perfectly. He observed that when a prince felt compelled to explain his policies to his subjects, those subjects began to see themselves as equals to the prince. The moment you place yourself in the position of having to convince someone that your choice was correct, you've elevated them to the position of your judge. Here's what happens psychologically when you justify yourself. You signal that your decision-making process is incomplete without their validation. You suggest that their opinion matters more than your own conviction. You demonstrate that you're uncertain about your own choices. And most dangerously, you invite them to critique, modify, or reject your decisions in the future. Think about a parent who constantly explains their rules to their children versus a parent who states expectations clearly and stands by them. Which child respects which parent more? The child whose parent justifies every boundary learns to negotiate and challenge. The child whose parent states boundaries without apology learns to respect authority. This same dynamic plays out in every relationship. The boss who justifies every decision to employees invites constant questioning and undermines their own authority. The partner who explains every choice to their significant other creates a dynamic where all decisions become subject to approval. The friend who defends every personal choice signals that their autonomy is up for debate. The approval trap. When you justify your actions, you're essentially saying, I need you to think this was a good idea. But here's the trap. If you need their approval, you give them power to withdraw it. If you need their understanding, you make yourself dependent on their comprehension. If you need their acceptance, you become controlled by their judgment. Machiavelli saw this pattern destroy countless leaders. They would make bold decisions, but then spend enormous energy trying to convince everyone why those decisions were correct. This need for constant validation revealed insecurity and invited challenge. The subjects began to feel they had a vote in the prince's choices. The authority test. Every time someone questions your decision, they are testing your authority, not consciously, but instinctively. When you immediately jump to justify yourself, you fail the test. You signal that you yourself are unsure, that you lack conviction, that your decisions are subject to external review. The strong response isn't explanation, it's calm acknowledgement of their concern, followed by unwavering commitment to your choice. I understand you disagree. This is still my decision. No justification, no detailed reasoning, no attempt to convert them to your perspective. The habit of justifying your actions doesn't just weaken individual interactions, it systematically destroys your long-term authority and creates a reputation that invites constant challenge. Machiavelli observed that once a leader became known as someone who could be questioned and would explain themselves, the questioning never stopped. Here's what happens when you develop a pattern of justification. People learn that if they push back against your decisions, you'll provide detailed explanations. This teaches them that your choices aren't final. They're opening positions in a negotiation. Every decision becomes a debate. Every choice becomes a committee discussion. The precedent problem. When you justify one decision, you create an expectation that all future decisions will be justified. You can't selectively decide when to explain yourself after you've established that pattern. People will expect the same level of explanation for everything, and when you don't provide it, they'll assume you have something to hide or that you're being unreasonable. This is why inconsistency in this area is so damaging. You either establish yourself as someone whose decisions stand on their own merit, or you establish yourself as someone whose decisions are subject to public review. There's no middle ground that doesn't create confusion and resentment. The respect erosion. Each time you justify yourself, you chip away at the respect others have for your judgment. They begin to think, if their decisions were really solid, they wouldn't need to explain them so much. They start questioning not just your current choice, but your decision-making capability in general. Machiavelli noted that subjects who initially accepted their prince's authority without question gradually became more bold in their challenges. Once the prince began explaining his policies, the explanations, meant to increase understanding and support, actually increased criticism and resistance. The time trap, constant justification, becomes a massive time sink. Instead of making decisions and moving forward, you spend enormous energy explaining, re-explaining, and defending past choices. You become reactive rather than proactive. Your focus shifts from creating results to managing perceptions. Think about how much mental energy you waste rehearsing explanations for your choices, anticipating objections, and crafting responses to potential criticism. So if you don't justify your actions, what do you do when people question them? Machiavelli had a clear answer. You acknowledge without explaining, you redirect without defending, and you demonstrate authority through calm certainty rather than detailed reasoning. The Machiavellian response isn't rudeness or dismissiveness. It's strategic non-engagement, with the premise that you owe anyone an explanation. You recognize their right to have an opinion, while maintaining your right to act independently of that opinion. The acknowledgement technique. When someone questions your decision, acknowledge their concern without accepting their authority to judge. I understand you have concerns about this. I see this isn't what you would have chosen. I recognize you disagree with this approach. Notice what these responses do. They validate their feelings without validating their right to approve your choices. This is crucial because it prevents the conversation from escalating into an argument while maintaining your position. You're not dismissing them as people, but you're not submitting your decision to their review either. The redirect strategy. After acknowledgement, redirect the conversation away from your reasoning and toward practical next steps. Here's what we're going to do moving forward. This is how we'll implement this decision. Let me know if you need clarification on your role in this process. Machiavelli understood that when you shift focus from why to what and how, you move the conversation from debate to execution. You stop defending the decision and start implementing it. This subtle shift forces others to either get on board or openly rebel, and most people will choose to get on board. The confidence display. Your tone and body language during these interactions communicate everything. Speak slowly and clearly. Maintain steady eye contact. Keep your posture open but firm. Don't fidget. Don't rush. Don't show any signs of uncertainty or defensiveness. The message your presence should communicate is this decision has been made thoughtfully, and I'm completely comfortable with it. Your approval, while appreciated, is not required for me to proceed with confidence. The results focus, when pressed for justification, redirect to outcomes. We'll evaluate this decision based on the results it produces. Time will demonstrate whether this was the right choice. I'm confident this approach will deliver what we need. This does something powerful. It shifts the conversation from abstract debate about your reasoning to concrete measurement of your effectiveness. You're saying, don't judge my thinking, judge my results. This is much stronger ground to defend because results are objective, while reasoning is subjective. The broken record. If someone continues to push for explanation after you've used these techniques, simply repeat your position calmly. As I mentioned, this is the direction we're taking. Like I said, I'm comfortable with this choice. Again, we'll move forward with this approach. Here's where most people break. When you start refusing to justify your actions, some people will escalate their tactics to try to force you back into explanation mode. They'll use emotional manipulation, social pressure, accusations of unreasonableness, or appeals to fairness. This is when your resolve will be tested most severely. Machiavelli observed that when a prince stopped explaining his policies, certain courtiers would become more aggressive in their challenges, trying to restore the old dynamic where they had input into royal decisions. The prince's response to this escalation determined whether his authority would be respected or eroded. The emotional manipulation. I can't believe you won't even explain this to me. This is so unlike you. I thought we had better communication than this. These statements are designed to make you feel guilty for maintaining boundaries. They're attempting to frame your refusal to justify as a character flaw or relationship problem. The Machiavellian response. Stay focused on behavior, not emotions. I understand you're frustrated. The decision remains the same. Don't get drawn into defending your communication style or your character. You're not being unreasonable. You're being decisive. The social pressure. Everyone else thinks you should explain this. No one understands why you're being so secretive. People are starting to talk. This tactic attempts to isolate you and make you feel like your position is socially unacceptable. Your response. I'm comfortable with my approach, regardless of what others think. When you stop justifying your actions, something fascinating happens in other people's minds. They begin to attribute your confidence to superior knowledge, deeper thinking, or hidden information that they don't possess. Your refusal to explain creates an aura of mysterious competence that actually increases their respect for your judgment. Machiavelli understood this psychological phenomenon perfectly. He observed that the most influential advisors rarely explained their reasoning in detail. Their recommendations came with quiet confidence, but minimal justification. This made their counsel seem more valuable, not less, because it appeared to come from a level of understanding that others couldn't easily access. The expertise assumption. When someone makes decisions without extensive explanation, observers unconsciously assume there must be good reasons they're not sharing. The human mind abhors uncertainty, so it fills gaps with positive assumptions when the person appears confident and competent. Think about how you perceive experts in fields you don't understand. The surgeon who recommends a procedure without explaining every anatomical detail seems more authoritative than one who launches into lengthy justifications. The financial advisor who makes confident recommendations seems more knowledgeable than one who second-guesses themselves through detailed explanations. The information advantage. By not explaining your reasoning, you create the impression that you're operating with information or insights that others don't have. People begin to wonder, what do they know that I don't? What are they seeing that I'm missing? Why are they so confident when I would be uncertain? This curiosity actually works in your favor. Instead of questioning your judgment, they start questioning their own understanding. Instead of challenging your decision, they start trying to figure out your superior reasoning. The competence signal. In professional environments, the person who doesn't feel compelled to justify every choice appears more senior, more experienced, more authoritative. They seem like someone who has moved beyond the need to prove their thinking to others because their track record speaks for itself. Machiavelli noted that new princes often over-explained their policies because they felt insecure about their authority. Established rulers made pronouncements with minimal justification because their position was secure. Ironically, the over-explanation actually undermined the new prince's authority, while the confident brevity reinforced the established ruler's power. The strategic mystique. When your decision-making process remains somewhat mysterious, people can't easily predict your next move or anticipate your reasoning. This unpredictability becomes a strategic advantage because others can't position themselves to counter your arguments or prepare objections to your logic. You become harder to manipulate because people can't identify the exact pressure points in your reasoning. You become harder to undermine because they can't attack specific elements of your thinking process. The paradox is that saying less makes you appear to know more. Explaining less makes you seem more expert. Justifying less makes your decisions seem more justified. The ability to stop justifying your actions isn't just a behavioral change. It requires developing genuine confidence in your decision-making process. You can't fake this long-term. If you don't truly believe in your choices, your attempt to avoid justification will come across as stubborn defensiveness rather than quiet authority. Machiavelli understood that true power came from internal certainty, not external performance. A prince who was genuinely confident in his policies could remain calm under questioning because he knew his reasoning was sound. A prince who was internally uncertain would eventually crack under pressure and reveal his insecurity through over-explanation. Developing your decision framework. The foundation of decision confidence is having a clear, consistent process for making choices. When you know you've considered the relevant factors, weighed the options appropriately, and chosen based on solid reasoning, you don't need external validation to feel secure in your choice. This doesn't mean your decisions will always be perfect. It means you can be confident that you made the best decision possible with the information available at the time. That confidence allows you to stand by your choice without needing to prove to others that it was correct. Accepting imperfect information. One reason people seek validation through explanation is that they're uncomfortable making decisions without complete certainty. But Machiavelli knew that leaders must often act with incomplete information. The ability to make solid decisions despite uncertainty is what separates leaders from followers. Build comfort with ambiguity by recognizing that waiting for perfect information often means missing opportunities or failing to act when action is needed. Sometimes the decision to act with 80% certainty is better than the decision to wait for 100% certainty that may never come. Learning from outcomes, not opinions. Shift your feedback system from external approval to external results. Instead of asking, "Do people think this was a good decision?" ask, "Did this decision produce the outcomes I intended?" Instead of seeking validation through explanation, seek validation through effectiveness. This doesn't mean ignoring all input from others. It means distinguishing between useful feedback about outcomes and unnecessary approval seeking about your reasoning process. Results are objective. Opinions about your thought process are often just noise. Building historical confidence. Keep a record of your past decisions and their outcomes. This builds confidence in your judgment over time. When you can look back and see that your decisions generally produce good results, you become less dependent on others' approval of your current choices. Machiavelli advised leaders to study their own patterns of success and failure, not to second-guess every choice, but to understand their own decision-making strengths and blind spots. This self-knowledge creates the internal security needed to act without constant external validation. The authority mindset. Ultimately, you must accept that you are the primary authority on your own life and choices. Other people can have opinions, but you have responsibility. You live with the consequences of your decisions, so you get to make them without committee approval. Let's get specific about how this principle applies in real-world situations. These are the moments where most people automatically default to justification, not realizing they're undermining their own authority in the process. Workplace decisions. Your boss questions a strategic choice you made. The weak response. Well, I thought about it from several angles, and considering the budget constraints and the timeline pressure, plus the feedback from the client meeting last week, the strong response. I'm confident this approach will deliver the results we need. I'll keep you updated on progress. Notice the difference. The first response invites further questioning and suggests you're uncertain. The second response demonstrates ownership and focuses on outcomes rather than process. Personal relationships. Your partner questions why you chose to spend time with certain friends or pursue a particular hobby. The weak response involves detailed explanations about your social needs, the value of the activity, or defensive justifications about your right to have interests. The strong response, this is important to me, and I'm comfortable with my choice. Parenting situations. Your teenager challenges a rule or consequence you've established. Machiavelli would recognize this as a fundamental test of authority. The weak parent launches into explanations about fairness, safety concerns, and life lessons. The strong parent acknowledges the challenge and maintains the boundary. I understand you disagree. The rule stands. Financial choices. People question your spending decisions, investment choices, or financial priorities. The justification trap involves explaining your budget, your long-term goals, or defending the value of your purchases. The authoritative response. I'm comfortable with how I manage my finances. Career moves. When you change jobs, decline opportunities, or make professional choices that others don't understand, resist the urge to provide detailed explanations about your reasoning, your values, or your long-term strategy. Instead, this decision aligns with my priorities. Social situations. You decline invitations, leave events early, or make social choices that others question. The over-explainer discusses their energy levels, other commitments, or personal preferences in detail. The confident person simply says, "This works better for me." The key pattern. In every scenario, notice that the strong response acknowledges the other person's concern without accepting their authority to approve your choice. You're not being rude or dismissive. You're being decisive and self-directed. Machiavelli observed that consistent application of this principle across all areas of life creates a reputation for decisiveness and authority. People learn that questioning your choices doesn't result in lengthy explanations, so they gradually stop expecting them. The most important insight is that this isn't about being stubborn or unreasonable. It's about recognizing that your decisions don't require external approval to be valid. When you truly internalize this understanding, others sense it and naturally respect your autonomy. Even with perfect understanding of this principle, most people make predictable errors when they first start implementing it. Machiavelli warned that the transition from justification to authority required careful calibration. Too aggressive, and you appear arrogant. Too hesitant, and you appear uncertain. Mistake 1. The pendulum swing. You go from over-explaining everything to refusing to provide any context whatsoever. You become unnecessarily secretive or dismissive when simple information sharing would be appropriate. Remember, there's a difference between justifying your decisions and providing relevant information for implementation. The fix. Distinguish between explaining your reasoning, justification, and sharing necessary details, communication. We're implementing this new process starting Monday, is information sharing. We're implementing this new process because I think it's better than our current approach, and here's why, is justification. Mistake 2. The defensive tone. Your refusal to justify comes across as hostile or defensive rather than confident. You sound like you're hiding something, or you're insecure about your choice. The power of this approach lies in calm certainty, not aggressive resistance. The fix. Practice delivering your responses with neutral, professional tone. I'm comfortable with this decision should sound matter-of-fact, not challenging. Your energy should communicate confidence, not defiance. Mistake 3. The context blindness. You apply this principle inappropriately in situations where explanation is actually required or helpful. Your boss asks for your reasoning on a project decision because they need to understand your approach for strategic purposes, not because they're questioning your authority. The fix: learn to distinguish between requests for information and challenges to your authority. When someone needs to understand your approach to do their job effectively, provide that information. When someone is questioning your right to make the decision, maintain your boundaries. Mistake 4. The relationship damage. You prioritize appearing authoritative over maintaining important relationships. You become so focused on not justifying yourself that you stop being responsive to legitimate concerns from people whose opinions you should value. The fix: remember that the goal is earned respect, not isolation. With people whose relationships matter to you, you can acknowledge their concerns more fully while still maintaining your decision-making autonomy. I understand this affects you, and I've considered that in my decision. Recovery strategy. If you've made these mistakes and damaged relationships or your reputation, the path back is consistent. Calm application of the correct approach. Don't justify your past over corrections. Simply start implementing the principle properly going forward. Machiavelli understood that leadership skills developed gradually through practice and adjustment. The key is learning from errors without abandoning the fundamental principle. Your authority grows through consistent, appropriate application, not through perfect execution from day one. When you consistently refuse to justify your actions over time, something profound happens to both your internal psychology and your external reputation. You don't just change how you respond to challenges. You transform into someone who rarely gets challenged in the first place. Machiavelli observed this transformation in successful rulers. Initially, they had to actively resist the urge to over-explain their policies. But gradually, as their subjects learned that questioning wouldn't result in lengthy justifications, the questioning itself diminished. The ruler's authority became so established that most people simply accepted their decisions without challenge. The internal shift, months of not justifying your actions, builds genuine confidence in your decision-making ability. You stop second-guessing yourself because you're no longer seeking constant external validation. Your choices become more decisive because you're not optimizing for explainability, you're optimizing for effectiveness. This internal transformation is crucial because authentic authority can't be faked long-term. When you truly believe in your right to make decisions without committee approval, that belief radiates through every interaction. People sense when someone is genuinely secure in their choices versus when they're performing confidence. The reputation evolution. Over time, you develop a reputation as someone who thinks carefully, decides decisively, and stands by their choices. People begin to trust your judgment more because they see consistency between your decisions and your conviction about those decisions. This reputation creates a positive feedback loop. Because people respect your decision-making process, they're less likely to challenge your choices. Because they challenge your choices less frequently, you become even more comfortable with your authority. The dynamic reinforces itself naturally. The relationship upgrade. Paradoxically, when you stop justifying yourself to others, your relationships often improve. People no longer see you as someone who needs their approval to feel confident. Instead, they see you as someone who values their opinion but doesn't require their permission. This shift often increases respect and reduces the controlling dynamics that can poison relationships. When people know they can't manipulate you through emotional pressure to justify your choices, they stop trying and start relating to you as an equal rather than someone they can influence. The leadership emergence. In group settings, you naturally become someone others look to for decisions. When everyone else is debating and explaining and second-guessing, your calm certainty stands out. People gravitate toward those who appear to know what they're doing and aren't constantly seeking validation. Machiavelli would recognize this as the ultimate goal, becoming someone whose authority is so natural and established that it's rarely questioned, not through force or manipulation, but through consistent demonstration of thoughtful decision-making, combined with unwavering confidence in your choices. The person who never justifies their actions becomes someone whose actions rarely need justification. That's true power.